Hey everybody, it's Christine and welcome to this episode of Hormonally Speaking. So glad that you are here with us today. As always, I have, amazing guests that come on this show. And today I'm particularly intrigued and I don't know if the word is excited, but just moved by this woman's story. So her name is Tara Coyote, and I actually follow her on Instagram and learn about her story in that way. So she has been facing breast cancer in this just tremendous way, and just out there sharing her story, sharing her trials and ups and downs, and it's incredible. So she was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer about 3.5 years ago, and then originally she chose to just do exclusively the kind of natural path for 2.5 years. I would think probably most of you kind of understand what that looks like as compared to going the traditional allopathic path. But at that point, her life was turned upside down, and she was forced to sell the ranch and the retreat center that she owned at that time. And then the cancer spread. So she moved back to her home place of Kaua'i and facing death and, the recommendation of getting into hospice. She decided to face her fears around the allopathic medicine and do the thing that most people end up doing with, advanced cancer, which is chemo. So after 9 months of intense chemo, her last test scores, which she just recently got in the last couple of weeks, showed that she's cancer-free, which is incredible, and what a journey, right? So it doesn't mean she doesn't have any cancer in her body, but she has really come out on top in this this thing that she's been facing for so long. And though, of course, it's never ending, just to take the time and really appreciate, I think, what she has gone through is such an amazing thing. So welcome, Tara. Sorry,
Thank you.
Tara. I knew
Okay.
I'd do it. Thank you so much
Well,
for being here.
thank you for having me. It's an honor. Happy
Yeah,
to be
yeah.
here.
So you have just this, incredible story that I just gave a little bit of a synopsis about, but that's really the version from being on the outside. So I really want to share with people what your experience is like being on the inside, particularly with, this epidemic of breast cancer that we have really in this country at this point. So you want to start with your story?
Sure. Yeah. Like you said, I was diagnosed 3.5 years ago with stage 3 breast cancer. A little bit about my history is that my best friend of 19 years was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia before I had my cancer journey.
Wow.
And I saw her choose the completely standard route because acute myeloid leukemia is the most aggressive form of blood cancer. And I was by her side for 22 months in the hospital with her for months at a time. She chose, lots of chemo. She did a bone marrow transplant. And I had a lot of trauma due to that circumstance of being with her. So
I can imagine. Oof.
yeah, it was heartbreaking. It was beautiful and it was heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
So she unfortunately died, and almost exactly to the day, like a year after she died, I was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. And I was, I've always been very natural my whole life. My mother was like that. I've never taken pharmaceuticals, except for low dose thyroid medicine. I just want to add that.
Yeah. Hey, girl, I know. I know the need for that.
Right. It is kind of common.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, but when I was faced, they told me that I had to get a mastectomy, lots of chemo, lots of radiation. And I was terrified by that. So I really dove into myself to find my inner strength and thought, like, okay, I'm going to choose a natural method. And in that time, I also decided to be in the public eye. So I've been blogging and videoing about my journey this whole time. And I was doing really well for a long time. It was almost cancer-free, according to some tests.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like you said, I experienced a lot of upheaval in my life. I had to let go of my beautiful ranch and retreat center that I ran in Northern California. And it was incredibly stressful to let that go. And during that time, the cancer spread to multiple places in my body, to my lungs, my liver, my bones, my adrenal glands. And I moved back home to Kaua'i to heal, where my dad's from. And when I was here, the whole medical system here is much more gentle than Northern
Mm.
California, more of the aloha spirit. And I had several doctors, a year ago. So they told me, like, the natural doctors and the natural doctors all said, Tara, we think you should consider chemotherapy. It might save your life. Because at that
Mm.
point, the cancer was so bad in my lungs, like I couldn't have a conversation. I had to sleep sitting up for months at a time.
Oh,
I was just coughing constantly, and my bones were starting to break down. I had to walk with a cane in my left hip. It
wow.
was so severe. And so at that point, I was preparing for death. Like, I was getting my paperwork in order. I had a death midwife lined up. I mean, it was
Mm. Mm-hmm.
very serious, and my family was coming out to visit me. I thought, okay, well, I really want to live. I didn't want to do chemotherapy, but my love for life and my son, it gave me strength. Like, okay, I'm going to try this. I don't want to do it, but I'll try it. And I had to face a lot of the trauma regarding my dear friend Deb's death.
Mm.
And I've done an extreme amount of healing in this time. And so I did 9 months of chemo. It was very difficult. During that time, about 4 months ago, I broke my left hip because
Oof.
the bone metastasis was so bad. So I had to have double hip surgery, uh, a hip replacement surgery on the left hip, and then a rod put in on my right leg from my knee to my hip to prevent future breakage on my right side. So I had to learn to walk again, and it's been a rough journey, but I have to say I've grown so much, and I'm extremely grateful to be alive now. I feel like I've been given a second chance, and I am just living my life fully. I'm wanting to make a documentary showing other late stage cancer journeyers who are thriving and beating the odds. So I'm just so happy to be alive and to be given a second chance. And I just also wanted to add that I'm still doing natural methods all this time.
Mm.
I've been doing vitamin IVs and lots of supplements and really keeping that going, which is why I think I'm doing so well, because I'm doing a complementary method of healing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'll definitely want to dive into that later. There's so many questions that came up while you were talking. And then we start at the beginning. So, how did you actually find out you had breast cancer in the first place?
Right. Well, during the time my dear friend Deb was sick, I was extremely pushed to my limit because I was taking care of a ranch by myself and two horses and driving a lot, because she lived down in Marin. I lived in Nevada City, California. So it was like 7 hour round trip. So sometimes I would take a trip once a day to go see her
Wow.
because she was, dying
Yeah.
during a period of that time. And so I was really pushed to my limit. So I wasn't practicing great self-care. Like, I wasn't listening to my body. It was all about showing up for her. A lot of times people with breast cancer, they tend to be caregivers, and
Mm.
that's definitely my case.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't listening and paying attention to my body. About 9 months after she died, I started noticing that there was a lump in my left breast that was not going away. It was starting to get bigger. And I've always had lumpy breasts,
Mm.
so I was not, I would dismiss it being like, oh, my breast just being lumpy, it's just what it does.
Right.
But it was at a point where the lump was becoming too prominent that it was like, I think I should get this checked
Mm-hmm.
out.
Mm-hmm.
So of course I tried to make an appointment. It took me like a month or two to finally get it checked out with insurance and all that. But by the time I found out, it was like, okay, yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
pretty far along. It's stage
Mm-hmm.
3.
What do you think about thermography? Is it thermography? Is that how you say it? Yeah.
Yes,
What do you think
thermography.
about that versus, sort of the traditional method of trying to figure out? Because I know people are trying to get the less radiation. Have you found that that's a good avenue for women?
I definitely think it's a great avenue. It's a
Yeah.
lot less toxic.
Yeah.
I did do a thermogram. I was living in Marin for many years, and I did one there.
Mm-hmm.
And my mistake was not to follow through it, but I should have been doing that, once a year or so, because
Mm-hmm.
of the cost, because insurance didn't cover it. I
Right.
didn't do it.
Right.
In retrospect, it would have been really good if I had. So I definitely think thermography is great because you can detect cancer far earlier than a mammogram can, and you don't get the radiation. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah, I highly believe in thermography.
Yeah, another thing that obviously should be covered by insurance, but because
Yes,
it's a woman's thing, it's not.
right.
Yeah. So, anyways, the other thing that I really, I thought about as you were telling your story was how did you deal with your hips? This is while you were doing chemo, right?
Yes.
How did you handle getting surgery during chemo? I mean, do they stop the chemo for you to go into surgery?
They did. Well, I broke my hip and then I was in the hospital for a week, and
Mhm.
then there was a lot of rehab I had to do. So I think I took 2 months off of getting chemo. I
Okay.
did go back and try it once, but the bone pain was so intense because the type of chemo I was getting, Taxol creates bone pain. So it was too
Right.
much for me to handle. So I
Right.
had to wait till my body was a little bit more recovered to do it, which was a good thing because that would have been too much to do all at
So
once.
much. Yeah.
Right.
So I'm in an ostomy support group. I had a tragedy happen to me a couple years ago that probably most of my listeners know about by now, but I had a fibroid removed, and they unknowingly burned me in 3 places in my intestines during that surgery. And I ended up with sepsis and lost about half of my colon. And I had an ostomy for about 6.5 months. And, as painful as that situation was, being an ostomy support group and seeing so many people with cancer, often it's colon cancer. And so they ended up having to get part of their colon removed, and do radiation therapy, and sometimes chemo too. And just the pain of having to do surgeries and the radiation, the chemo, it just breaks my heart every time I read stories about that. It's just, it's it's so hard to think that anybody ever, has to hold that much in
Right.
a lifetime.
It's a
So
lot.
yeah, and so I'm curious how you've held everything that you've had to face, including watching your friend go through such pain for so long, and then having to go through this experience on your own.
Yeah, great question. I'm sorry you had to go through that, by the way. I just want to add that. My attitude is, I think attitude is everything, to be honest. My attitude is like, okay, yes, this is tremendously challenging, but it'll just make me stronger. Attitude of gratitude is
Mhm.
cliche, but I tend to take that attitude of like, find the beauty, find the joy. Okay, yes, it's hard. I'm stuck in a hospital. I can't get out of bed, but these nurses are wonderful beings. So
Ugh,
just finding
amazing.
something,
Yeah.
some gem of like, okay, yeah, I'm stuck in bed for a couple weeks and I have to learn to walk. So here's an opportunity to take time to talk with my friends on the phone or read a book or
Mhm.
whatever it may be. So
Mhm.
my attitude's always been find a way through, like find the beauty. And it's I'm very fortunate that I moved back home to Kauai because I
Mhm.
am surrounded by so much beauty and it's
Mhm.
more relaxed pace of life. So I think that's helped me tremendously.
Mhm.
But yeah, just the attitude. I think of it also, Joseph Campbell talks about the hero's journey. I think
Mhm.
that like the heroine's journey where there's obstacles, and so how do you get through it? How do you keep going? And
Mhm.
that's been my attitude all the way
Mhm.
along. Also, I just want to add, the mother of my niece also died after my friend Deb did. So these were two of my closest friends, and they both died very young from cancer, 46 and 47. So there's been a lot of death. It's been very challenging. So, and
Yeah.
in that, there's a gift of also facing death because I
Mhm.
feel like we live in a death phobic culture.
Mhm.
So, if we face the fear of death and it's not so scary anymore, then we can really come to life. So,
Yeah.
these are some of the lessons that I've learned along the way.
And how important are those right now, right? With everything that we're facing in the world, right? This is kind of the
Yeah.
biggest thing of most of our lifetimes, in terms of the coronavirus, and the impact that it will undoubtedly have for everyone. I mean, I just read, just I think right before we got on the call, that Italy's death toll went up to like 800 and something, just in 24 hours. It was like 172 yesterday or something like that. And talk about having to face death really fast, right? In a
Yes.
completely different way. And so, as you were talking, I was thinking about the thing that was very interesting for me when I was in the hospital, because I ended up being in the hospital, I think about 2 weeks after my emergency surgeries, which at that point felt like forever to me, and then I learned about how many people were in the hospital for months, and it's just, yeah, heartbreaking to think about that. But I remember, people would talk to me about certain things, and I was like, all I can do, like, I don't want to say your role gets really small, but it gets really focused, right? You're like, okay, I can only focus on this moment in front of me. And when you're in extreme pain, it's just like getting through that minute of pain, right? And getting
Very
through the
true.
next minute of pain. And then, as you start to get a little bit better, you're like, okay, I can think a little bit outside of this bed that I'm in.
Right.
And I remember having part of what would get me through the night sometimes, because I couldn't sleep at all, was just dreaming of a house and the people that I love being in it as much as possible. Right. And that to me was such a clarification of what was important in life that we forget when all of these, we're chasing all of these things that we think that we want.
Right. Well
Yeah.
said. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it can be a gift, like you said, to
Mhm.
tune into what truly matters. So,
Mhm. Mhm.
and
Wow.
when we go about life, I know before Deb was diagnosed, I just had this idea of like, of course I'll live to be in my 80s and I
Right.
have tons of time to do whatever I want. But now it's like, okay, I'm alive now. What do I want to do? And who do I want to be around? So
Yeah.
really
S-
focuses what's
y-
going on for you.
Right. Right. At what point during the chemo journey were you able to start, feeling good enough again to kind of be out in the world more?
Right. Well, when I first started out with chemo, I did a lot of the protocol for breast cancer is you do 2 months or so of AC, it's called,
Okay.
and then Taxol. That's what I had for hormone driven breast cancer.
Hmm.
So I had 2.5 months of AC due to complications because I landed in the hospital in June due to intense mouth and throat sores where I couldn't eat. So they were admitted me to the hospital. So those 2.5 months were very hard. That was the hard chemo that knocked all my hair off. This is not my hair. These are my fun braids,
They
my
are
stuff
super
really.
fun though. I love
Yeah, I'm like, why not enjoy life and have
them.
braids, have fun.
Totally.
um, so that was very difficult. That definitely knocked me out where I had to have kind of like a full-time caregiver. I couldn't really
Mm,
function well. I lost 25 pounds. I mean,
wow.
what happens with intense chemo, it pushes your immune system to the edge because you're killing the cancer, but of
Right.
course you knock out the immune system too.
Right.
So this past summer I stopped doing that and then I started the Taxol, which was easier for me to manage. I could actually function better. So I'd have a day or two feeling really knocked out.
Mm,
And then the rest of the week I'd feel better. I mean,
mm-hmm.
not that it was easy by any means,
Mm-hmm.
but I could take care of myself and, do more normal activities. But it
Mm-hmm.
still was very challenging too. I had to really know, okay, I'm doing chemo on Tuesday, which means I'll feel really bad Thursday through Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just learning the cycle basically. And also, a lot of people with cancer, it's challenging because you feel very alone in the situation.
Yeah.
So a lot of people isolate and it's hard because you're dealing with your own fear of death and the culture's fear of death and all the stigma around cancer. So I really forced myself to go out and go dancing, do whatever I love to do basically, despite what I was going through. But yeah, it takes a lot of courage. So this is actually why I'm sharing my story, to try to help other people because it
Mm-hmm.
is so challenging.
Are you a believer in support groups, like being a part of support groups, or do you think that can kind of, sorry, my cat likes to jump
That's
through
okay.
sometimes, or do you think that can be a hindrance in the healing process?
I think if a support group feels nurturing, that's a
Mm-hmm.
great idea. I live here in Kaua'i and there's not so much in that way, but
Mm-hmm.
I have connected with so many people online through social
Mm-hmm.
media and Facebook and Instagram all over the world, people going through this journey. And that's been very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, for sure, if there was a support group I resonated with, I would definitely go to.
Yeah. Well,
But
I
I
love.
think it's different for everybody.
Right, right. Well, I do think, and I've told people this numerous times, like, I didn't know, I don't know why I didn't think about it when I first got my ostomy. Like, I didn't know that there were Facebook ostomy support groups. And I remember I started Googling as soon as I got home because there's only so much medical information that I got from the doctors, and I had to like fill in the blanks myself. And I came across all these old forums and, learned some stuff from that. And then finally somebody said, "Oh, have you looked on Facebook?" And I was like, "Well, duh." And then I ended up getting, in the support groups there. And I thought, okay, this is one of the tremendous gifts of social media. Like there's a lot of, bad things that we get with social media, but having that access, especially for people who can't really leave the house, like if they're in
Right.
that place, and their family just doesn't. No matter what, no matter how empathetic they are, they can't ever fully understand, right? And so to be able to put your stuff out to a group of people that's actually going through the same thing that you're going through or has gone through the same thing, then you feel so much less alone, which I think is a huge component, right, of healing too.
So true. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
that's
important to have support, whatever or
yeah,
wherever it comes from, family, friends, social media. It
yeah,
just helps tremendously.
yeah. Well, thank you for sharing your story because I know it is helping a lot of people in that process. So,
Yeah.
with the IVs, were you doing that during the chemo too, or did you start that later in terms of IV vitamin C? I'm guessing and other things.
Yes,
Yeah.
well, I've been doing high dose vitamin C infusions for, I would say, like 2.5 years or so during the
Okay.
natural journey. When I started doing chemo, I went down to, instead of doing the high dose vitamin C infusions, I
Hmm.
did like a vitamin and mineral infusion.
Hmm.
So it had vitamin C in, or has vitamin C in it, I should say, but it's not the full blast. Because what I found with the vitamin C, I'm so sensitive, it would knock me out for days. So I
Mm,
couldn't handle chemo knocking me out and the high dose vitamin C. So I've
right.
been doing once a week for this whole time the vitamin and mineral infusions, which I know has helped keep my body
Yeah.
strong.
Do you know
So
what minerals are in there?
not off the top of my
Okay.
head, but I
Yeah.
do have it written down and I can send you the info if you
Perfect. Yeah.
want.
I'm just, I'm curious because I know there's a lot of these places around now that you can go in and get infusions. I don't know if that's the kind of place that you go or if they have it in the hospital. I'm just curious for people that, are dealing with cancer or trying to do some prevention, how accessible these are to them.
Right. Well, they don't offer it through mainstream medicine, not at
Hmm.
least where I've seen. It's
Hmm.
usually you see a naturopathic doctor. Every time
Mm,
I've done it, it's been through naturopathic
gotcha.
doctors, basically.
Gotcha.
So alternative medicine.
Right.
And
We have,
unfortunately, you have to pay for it
of
too.
course,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
That's always all out of pocket, which I'd love to dive into here in a second, because I think that's a really important point. But we have a place here in Asheville, and I know it's in different places. It's called Hydrate, and I think Hydrate Medical is what they go by. But here they call it Hydrate Asheville, and I'll send clients there for vitamin B12 shots because they're the cheapest around. But they have these infusions of it'll be vitamin C and usually like glutathione and some different minerals and that kind of thing, depending. And then obviously, the potassium and sodium and that kind of thing. So
Right.
I was like, do they have that on Kauai? That would be kind of surprising to me. So
I
you,
think it's very similar. Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
That's about what I'm getting too.
yeah.
Yes.
So how has that been, the cost of dealing with cancer, both allopathically and I hate the word alternatively, but the functional, I guess I would call it the functional side of dealing with cancer.
Right. Yeah. It's always tricky, the terminology,
Yeah.
natural, all
Right.
that.
Yeah.
I
Yeah. Natural.
understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been very expensive, especially when I was doing the all natural approach,
Mm-hmm.
because insurance covered nothing.
Right.
A lot of that time I was in California, so I had to do multiple fundraisers.
Mm.
Honestly, I think I spent about $200,000. A lot of money. I did maybe 5 different fundraisers. I have a wonderful community of friends and family, and they all chipped in. And I put myself out a lot on social media, which helped too, because a lot
Mm-hmm.
of people knew about me.
Mm-hmm.
um, I ended up going to Mexico at one point, and I had to borrow money from a friend for that. And
Mm-hmm.
part of the reason why I lost the ranch is because my natural protocol was so expensive. I couldn't
Yeah.
afford to keep it anymore. So when I moved back home to Kauai, I was very blessed because my family's from here. So I had a place to live what wasn't as expensive. And also doing the allopathic care, it was covered by insurance. So
Mm-hmm.
now my costs are a lot lower, which I'm thankful for. I mean, I'm still getting a lot of supplements and paying for the IVs, but yeah, it's a lot to do the natural route. I know a lot of people on the path, and we all have to do fundraisers, and
Mm-hmm.
it's very challenging. It's a shame, as you mentioned earlier, that our insurance doesn't cover it. So a lot of people can't afford the natural route. So
Right.
they're forced to do the chemo and radiation and all
Right.
that.
And even with the allopathic route, I'm assuming that there's certain things that aren't covered or that you max out on too, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right. I'm fairly lucky. The insurance here in Hawaii is quite good.
Oh, that's
So
good.
I'm blessed that
That's good to know.
everything has been covered, but I know for some other people it isn't. So yeah, the
Right.
costs add up,
Right.
and that's another piece too, the stress of the cost, because of course
Yeah.
stress isn't good for our health. So if you're
Right.
stressed about money, then your body's ramped up and you're preventing the ultimate healing experience for yourself.
Right. And I mean, I think money is probably our biggest stressor as a human being, right? I mean, it's that ability to take care of yourself and it's really kicks into our survival mode issues, right? I mean, I think I'm seeing
Definitely.
that, we're all seeing that right now. I think we're all going to be impacted financially by the coronavirus and things shutting down. And, I have a lot of artist friends and everything, and they're dependent on events and things like that. And it's just, it's crazy intense. And so it's like, we have to do double duty to calm our nervous systems, right? So it's like if you
Mhm.
meditate normally for like 10 minutes, like kick into 20 or 30, or take an hour. Definitely obviously get off social media when you can, when it's just building up too much. Because I've done that in the past few days where I'm just like reading all the things and I'm like, stop, I know this is horrible for my immune system, right? The
Right.
thing that we need to be doing well as we're facing this crisis. um, so can you tell me a little bit more about Mexico? Like what kinds of things did they do there? I'm super curious.
Right, sure. I did some of the things in California that I did do in Mexico. There are, alternative,
Mm-hmm.
non-toxic places you can go in the United States
Mm-hmm.
for medicine, similar to what I did in Mexico. Though in
Mm-hmm.
the United States, it's harder to find because it's illegal and it's a lot more cost prohibitive. So
Mm-hmm.
when I was in Mexico, I did IVs, infrared sauna,
Mm-hmm.
ozone therapy,
Mm-hmm.
ultraviolet red light therapy. There was a lot of different things. I went to Hope for Cancer, and they have a lot of different protocols they do. It's focusing on food too,
Mm-hmm.
healthy
Mm-hmm.
food and juices, and let's see what else. I
Can,
think
can
that's
I ask
about
you?
it.
Can I ask you
Sure.
about the ozone therapy? Because I find this really fascinating. So I know that it's being used sometimes for people with Lyme disease, and then
Right.
um, I just got it done at the dentist's office for gum stuff that's going on. Receding gums, um, and it was funny because while I was there, the dental hygienist was who was working on my teeth, and I were going over my story. She said, "Oh, you should look into doing the ozone therapy anally." And I was like, "Oh, I didn't realize that that's how it's done. If it's trying to get in your body, is that what you had to do?"
Well, I didn't do that in Mexico, but when I
Okay.
came back home to Kauai, I did that here, and I purchased an ozone machine. So yeah, you can do it, put it through every orifice, basically, your
So is it kind of
ears,
like
your
an
nose.
enema when you do it that way? Or I'm just so curious. I'm sorry. I have to ask this question.
No, it's
Yeah.
okay. I know it creates a lot of curiosity.
Yeah.
I guess, yeah, it is. You put it in rectally. You
Yeah.
also can put it in your yoni too,
Yeah.
your
Okay.
vagina.
Yeah.
You,
Vagina tear. Yeah.
but rectally, yeah, you put it in and you hold it, and then you basically release it.
Okay.
So they also have ozone where they could pump it into your blood as well,
That's what I
which is
think.
what I did in Mexico.
Right. That's what the people that I know that have Lyme, they've done it that way. And so
Right,
I was really interested about this anally thing, and I was like, well, I would be a little bit nervous for me to do it just because I think my, microbiome was so thrown off with
right.
all the antibiotics and all of that kind of stuff, and I've been working hard to kind of reestablish things. So I'm like, I don't know if I want to introduce any ozone in there, but I was like, wow, I'm fascinated by that's an option because I know it. I mean, it really kills like everything it comes in contact with, right? Like all the
Right.
bacteria that it comes in contact with.
Yeah, it creates apoptosis of cancer cells
Okay.
because cancer doesn't thrive in an oxygen rich environment. And
Gotcha.
that's what ozone creates, basically. So
Gotcha.
that's the theory behind that.
And you're still using that at this point too. or no?
I've taken a little bit of a break from it.
Yeah.
When I was doing the chemo, it was basically I just could do what I could focus on.
Yeah.
So now I just finished chemo like a month ago or so. So I'm now kind of getting back into, okay, now what do I do post chemo? What can I bring
Mhm.
in? So I'm planning to bring that in. I just haven't done it yet because
Yeah,
life is
yeah.
full.
Well, we were talking a little bit before we got on here too about the hormones that you just got on, just you said on Sunday, I believe, and
Yes,
can we talk a little bit about those and how that impacted you? Because I think that's, a really important part of this whole thing too.
of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have hormone driven breast cancer, which
Hmm.
means, well, I just turned 50
Hmm.
just this past weekend. So it's been a big
Happy
month for me.
birthday.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Let's see. And so I was kicked into menopause this past spring. I did tamoxifen for about a month or two. And then without chemo, it just kicked me right into menopause. So I was like, okay, here we are. I didn't even have the symptoms before, which was kind of a blessing, as I was
Hmm.
telling you earlier.
Hmm.
And so I finished treatment recently. And the whole idea post treatment is to go on hormone blocking drugs because the hormones will still try to creep in and feed the breast cancer. So
Hmm.
they put me on, I started on Sunday with letrozole and Ibrance. They're the two drugs that are combined together to block your hormones. I did not feel good with both of them. Just this past Sunday, I was just knocked out, tired, couldn't even get out of bed. I told my doctor on Monday, I said, I can't do this. I need to
Hmm.
function. I have to be able to take care of my dog, for crying out loud.
Yeah, right? Come on.
Basic stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. Doggy is not having that.
Yes, she isn't. So he said, okay, well, he's going to try to get me on a different drug
Hmm.
and then to continue the letrozole. So he took me off the Ibrance. So meanwhile, now I'm just on the letrozole and I'm dealing with various side effects from that. I mean, I'm functional, as you can see. I'm
Hmm.
talking to you. I experience a little bit of nausea. I can tell it's working with my head a little bit. I've got a little
Hmm.
bit more anxiety going on than normal, which
Hmm.
also, as you were talking about the coronavirus, that's going on simultaneously. So
Sure.
what is what? So
Yeah, right,
my
exactly.
body's in the process of adjusting basically. So
Did they tell you that you would have, more menopausal symptoms as side effects from it?
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
And definitely it's kicked up my hot flashes to be like
Hmm.
mega hot flashes. It's like I feel when it's just I want to tear everything off. So
Yeah.
here we go.
So do you have to be on them long term?
Yes, it's
Yeah.
pretty much for the rest of my life.
Okay.
And because, I have the late stage breast cancer, other
Right.
people who aren't as advanced, well, they have to be on it as well too, but like maybe a lighter dose than
Yeah.
I do. So,
Gotcha.
but in the big picture, I'm hoping I can find a balance with it. And,
Yeah.
I'm alive and that's what counts. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and you've done that so well so far, figuring out that balance. So I know that you had mentioned this in one of your posts, and I've heard this several other places recently, and I think it's really interesting. This idea that stage 4 breast cancer was a death sentence at one point, but now it's looking more like a chronic, they're looking at it more like a chronic illness. So
yes.
can you explain that to people a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. I love to think of this actually. It gives me a lot of hope and other people in my situation because, there's a lot of fear in society. So if I tell people, yes, I'm journeying with stage 4 breast cancer, they all look at me like, oh my gosh, you're like a walking skeleton.
Right. Right. You're
It's
like,
like,
no.
no, I'm alive. I'm dancing. I'm living my life.
Yeah.
So that's part of the reason why I'm sharing my story too. Be like, you can live your life and have experienced joy while going through this.
Mhm.
So the medicine has shifted, and this is something I didn't know till a year ago, really,
Mhm.
to be at a point where you can sustain your life. It can be a chronic illness with
Mhm.
these supplements, which is also why I work really hard to drink healthy juice and
Mhm.
supplements and such
Mhm.
to keep my body stable. So it doesn't have to be a death sentence,
Mhm.
not to say everybody with stage 4 cancer is going to live,
Sure.
unfortunately some do pass, but my whole way of thinking was like, okay, so how can I maintain my life in a healthy way and use these medicines? So medicine is starting to shift to think of stage 4 cancer as a thing that can be managed with
Mhm.
medicines. And
Mhm.
I really focus on the frame of mind. I love the work of Joe Dispenza, who
Hmm.
focuses on mind over matter and
Hmm.
really thinking of my body as being healed, which
Hmm.
I know helps me quite a bit. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's, again, a wonderful thing for people to think about right now is bringing that into their days as much as they can. And I
definitely.
also, I mean, I don't know enough about cancer research, particularly breast cancer research, to speak to this, but I do feel like studies are being done on women in much bigger ways now, right? Like what we've learned over the past couple of years is that so much of science has not, women haven't been studied. We haven't been part of the studies. It's all been on men, and so there's this kind of catch up that's happening now. And so I'm just curious with with the speed of things kind of coming out now. Is that part of this being looked at more like a chronic illness, that within 2 more years there's probably going to be other medicines that will extend your life even more?
I believe so. I think
Mhm.
you're correct. I have a new oncologist and I really like him. He's on the cutting edge of research and such. And he told me
Mhm.
that same thing. He said medicines are changing so fast that,
Mhm.
could be in 6 months something else comes out. And
Mhm.
so there's a
Mhm.
lot to choose from, it seems like. And I know a lot of people on the breast cancer journey with stage 4 cancer, and
Mhm.
there's so many different drugs. Or, I get
Mhm.
information like I'm taking this, I'm taking that. So yeah, I don't really know so much about it, but I
Right.
do know there's a lot to choose from.
Yeah. And did you end up having to have a mastectomy or no?
I did not,
Okay.
and in retrospect, this is something I really want to share with people. So I was told to get a mastectomy. I tend to be pretty stubborn, and I'm like, I don't want to let go of my breasts. I
Right.
breastfed my son for 22 months, and I was very stubborn. Like, I can shrink this tumor on my own. And in retrospect, if I had gotten a mastectomy, I don't know for sure. Who knows
Sure.
what is what, but I could have possibly avoided the spreading of the cancer.
Mhm.
Um, so, I don't want to say like coulda, shoulda, woulda, because I
Right.
try to be like, I'm in the present and I'm meant to be here now.
Right.
But in retrospect, if I hadn't been so stubborn, then it would have helped me. So,
Mm.
if other women are in this position, I do encourage them to get a mastectomy.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that's part of the learning experience for me.
What an edge too, right? Of to figure out when. I mean, I
Yes.
think that's always such a debate with any kind of intense illness that comes up, and with surgery and everything too. And obviously with your breasts, it's such a
Yeah.
important part of being a woman, right? And yet,
Yeah.
I mean, everything you've been through has taught you all of these other much more important aspects of life and the bigger things. Yeah,
True.
yeah. Um, and I'm gonna actually have an expert on here soon, who focuses on breast implant illness, and
Okay.
yeah, and how this is a big thing that's coming up right now, and that quite a few women are having these kind of unknown things, even thinking like it's autoimmune issues, and then they end up getting their breast implants removed, and it turns out it was from them.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I just think it's really deep, and especially when you think about women with cancer who have mastectomies, and like I think that they deserve to be able to get breast implants, but then what can that bring too in the long term? So there's
Right.
just so many levels.
It
Woof.
really is. Yeah, and it's really tied in too also with our egos and identity, like you
Yeah.
said. I tend to have bigger breasts, and it was like, well, I don't want to lose one of my breasts,
Right.
and
Yeah.
so there it is. It's a very big topic, and I've heard that too about the implants. It can make women sick, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a tricky one.
So what are your what's the next steps? What's kind of, what are you looking forward to right now?
Oh, well, like I said, I'm just grateful to be alive.
Hmm.
I'm working on this documentary, interviewing people with late stage cancer who are positive, inspiring forces,
Nice.
and some people who've experienced radical remission.
Yes.
Based here in Kaua'i, it's got a
Nice.
Hawaiian backdrop because my family's from here, and it's so
Cool.
healing here. And I want to write a book as well, sharing my experience. I've been blogging this whole time, and writing has been such a gift to
Yeah.
channel whatever fear, anxiety, or happiness that I'm experiencing. So I
Well,
feel like I've gotten this, excuse me?
No, go
Sorry.
ahead. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I feel like I have a second chance. So I'm really going to try to put my message out there in the most effective way and just experience life and to the best of my ability, really.
Well, I love that because, I have to believe that we go through these experiences so that we can help others heal ultimately,
Right.
right? And
Yeah.
I mean, it's so great that you've been blogging this whole time because it's like you probably have a good chunk of your book right there on
Yeah.
your blog, right?
That's exactly. I was like, I have all this material. I might as well just bring it all together.
Yeah. Well, where can people go to find your blog?
So I started a page called cancerwarrioress.com, and
Okay.
I have all my blogs pages for the last 3.5 years. I haven't been as active there, but place where you can find me the most is Instagram. I really
Mm-hmm.
love the platform Instagram because you could put amazing pictures. I
Mm-hmm.
love the stories. So I do videos and such there. So that's Tara Coyote, Instagram, TaraCoyote.
Right.
I also have a YouTube page as well. And also Facebook page, Cancer Warriors. So I'm not as active there.
Mm-hmm.
We're also creating a page for my film, cancerthriverfilm.com, and we'll have
Ooh,
an Instagram and Facebook page. So that's coming soon. So
cool. Do you have any idea when the documentary is going to come out, or is it kind of you got to figure out as you go along with the stories?
it's in the beginning stages. I have 3 interviews so far, and we're really at the seed phase of just figuring out how we're going to do it and what makes most
Mm-hmm.
sense. And we'll do a fundraiser. So
Cool.
sometime
Well,
in the next year, I hope.
nice. Well, everybody should be on the lookout for that.
Yes.
Tara, thank you so much for being here with us today. This is amazing to hear your story, and I often talk about. I mean, I get frustrated with allopathic medicine. Don't get me wrong, but ultimately, I think we need to really have this marriage between allopathic and functional or natural health or whatever you want to call it, in order to really see us survive these next coming years, because the old ways have are dying out, but then it's like have all of this knowledge that has been around forever too that we can bring in, and really bridging those, I think, is so important. And obviously staying on the cutting edge of studies and medicine is huge, right? And you're a testament to that, right? This wouldn't have probably been true 5 years ago, I'm guessing.
I believe you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do want to say something about that. Thank you for
Mm-hmm.
saying that. Just, I was so stubborn in my belief system before that I was pushed to the edge of death. And if I had had more of an open mind before, I might have prevented this situation I'm in. And I also have seen friends who were so adhering to the natural method of healing that they unfortunately died. I've had many friends do that. And to the other extreme, people on the allopathic method. And every person is different on the cancer journey. It's not like there's one path. What works for me might not work for somebody
Mm-hmm.
else. But I think there is a really nice marriage of the two that can happen, complementary.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important for people to look at, because there is so much fear from one side to the
Mm-hmm.
other. So to
Mm-hmm.
bring it together can just create a lot of healing potential, basically.
Mm-hmm. And I'm glad that you even put the word fear in there, because I think, I'll have women that learn about my story and what happened to me, and they'll email me and they'll say, "Oh my God, I'm set for fibroid, surgery tomorrow, and I read your story and I'm freaking out now." And I said, you have to go into it with believing fully that it's going to be amazing. This is what you've set your mind to doing, and this is where you need to move into it. I mean, there's absolutely, I get it. I get the fear. Obviously, we're always going to be dealing with some level of that, but getting your mind wrapped around, okay, this is the path that I've chosen to take. And I always remind people that what happened to me was extreme. It doesn't happen to most women that undergo myomectomies. And if you've gotten to that point that this is the decision you've made because everything else hasn't worked out, then go into it, believing full force that it's going to be amazing and you're
Right.
going to do well, right?
Yep, there you go. Attitude is everything.
Yep, for sure. All right. Well, thanks again for being here with us today, and I will see you guys next week.